I was one sip away from dying when my granddaughter leaned in and whispered, "Grandma, don't drink that tea. I heard them say it was poisoned." She didn't giggle. She didn't roll her eyes. Her little hand clamped around my wrist, and the look on her face, 8 years old and already terrified, froze every bone in my 67-year-old body. The steam from the porcelain cup curled up like nothing was wrong. Same chamomile, same slice of lemon, same chipped floral mug I'd used in this Brooklyn brownstone every evening since my husband died. Late afternoon light slid across the counter, turning the tea gold and my hair silver. If you took a picture, it would look peaceful. It wasn't peaceful. Poisoned? I repeated, as if I'd misheard a word I'd known my whole life. Lily glanced toward the doorway. From the living room I could hear my daughter Helen's sharp, clipped sentences and Mark's smooth, lower answers. That quiet kind of arguing people do when they don't want the person in the next room to realize they're the subject. "I heard them in the kitchen," Lily whispered. "They said, 'Just put it in her tea. She won't even notice.' And Mommy said," she swallowed hard, "she said it's the fastest way to fix everything." My fingers tightened around the handle until my knuckles went white. You spend your whole life worrying about strangers in dark alleys and whatever the news screams about, and it turns out the real danger can sit in your favorite teacup. Very carefully, I put the cup back on the saucer so it wouldn't rattle. "Sweetheart," I said, because grandmothers are legally required to say sweetheart when things go to hell. "Are you sure that's what you heard?" "I'm not supposed to tell," she whispered. "Mommy says Grandma is fragile, but you're not fragile. You just walk slower." Despite the fact my possible murder might be in progress, a laugh punched out of me. It came out wrong, too sharp, hovering between humor and panic. "I do walk slower," I said, "but I'm not ready to be fixed." Her eyes filled with tears. "Please don't drink it." In the next room I heard heels start their familiar click-click across my hardwood floors. For years that sound meant my little girl was home. Lately, it made my shoulders creep up, like I was waiting for a test I hadn't studied for. I made a decision. I picked up the cup, turned toward the sink, and tripped. At 67, you don't have to be a great actress to sell a fall. Gravity is delighted to help. My slipper caught the edge of the rug, my arm flew out, and the cup sailed into the stainless steel sink with a loud, ugly crack. Tea went everywhere, across the counter, down the cabinet doors, all over my cardigan. I threw in a yelp for drama. "Mom!" Helen rushed into the doorway, eyes huge. "What happened?" I stared at the broken porcelain, at the yellow stream sliding toward the drain, and forced a shaky smile. "Apparently," I said, "your mother can't be trusted with ceramic anymore." Mark appeared behind her, phone in hand. His gaze slid from my wet sleeves to the sink to the empty spot on the table where the cup had been. For half a second, something sharp and mean flashed across his face. If I hadn't spent 30 years teaching teenagers how to lie badly, I might have missed it. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice smooth as polished marble. "Just clumsy," I replied. "It happens when you get old. We start dropping things. Like trust, like illusions, like the belief our children would rather set themselves on fire than ever hurt us." Helen exhaled, pressing a manicured hand to her chest. "You scared me. We were literally just saying, you shouldn't be alone in the kitchen so much. Remember the burner last week?" "Ah, yes, the burner, the one I was sure I'd turned off. Twice. The same burner Mark had oh so helpfully found, still warm when he came home, telling Helen, in a voice just loud enough for me to hear, that maybe I was slipping. "I remember," I said softly. Lily stood by the table, frozen, eyes bouncing between her mother and me. She looked like she'd swallowed a secret too big for her small body. "You go finish your homework, honey," Helen said. "Grandma needs to rest." Lily didn't move until I gave her a little nod. Then she walked out, but not before letting her fingers brush against mine. A quick, silent apology for something that wasn't her fault. Helen grabbed a dish towel and started wiping the counter, like the tea was the only mess in the room. "Mom, you're shaking," she said. "This house is too much for you. It's time we seriously talked about selling it and moving you somewhere safer, a place where people can keep an eye on you. Somewhere with rails in the hallway and plastic cups," I translated silently. "Somewhere far from this kitchen, from my shelves of books, from the front window where I drink my morning Starbucks and watch the Manhattan skyline wake up in the distance. Mark leaned against the doorframe, thumbs tapping idly on his phone, like I was another calculation he needed to run. My sleeves were damp, my hands trembled, and my chest felt hollow. Under all of that, something colder was waking up, like a part of me I'd put away when my husband died. If Lily hadn't whispered, I would have lifted that cup to my lips without a second thought. If Lily hadn't whispered, I might already be on my way to fixed. I straightened my shoulders just a little and met Helen's eyes. "We can talk about all that later," I said. "For now, I think I'll make myself another cup." Her smile thinned, and this time I added, "I'll pour it myself." The broken pieces glittered in the sink, tea swirling down the drain like a warning. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the dark outside my house. I was afraid of the people sleeping down the hall. If you had walked into my brownstone that evening, just an hour after the tea incident, you would have thought everything looked perfectly normal. Helen chopping vegetables with the enthusiasm of someone punishing the cutting board. Mark scrolling through his iPhone on the couch like he was waiting for a stock market miracle. Lily upstairs coloring. And me, sitting in my favorite armchair, pretending to read on my Kindle while keeping one eye on the kitchen like a spy who'd lost her training decades ago. But nothing felt normal anymore. My hands were still trembling. My heart was still thumping in that uneven, frightened rhythm. Every time Helen raised her voice, even slightly, my body jolted like she was shattering glass. The only thing keeping me from falling apart was the fact that Lily had warned me in time. And that, ironically, Helen believed I was too fragile to notice anything. Fragile, my ass. I'd survived losing my husband. I'd survived teaching high school seniors during the TikTok generation. I'd survived New York winters. I could survive this. Probably. "Mom?" Helen's voice floated from the kitchen. "Are you reading okay? The lighting in here is a little dim. Maybe it's too dark for your eyes." I forced a smile. "Honey, I've been reading longer than you've been alive." "Oh, right." She gave an awkward little laugh, the kind you hear right before someone tries to sell you life insurance. Mark appeared beside her, leaning against the doorframe with that salesman smile he practiced like a sport. "You know, Maggie," he said casually, "we've been looking at brochures for a very charming assisted living community. It's near the river, very peaceful, very safe." My jaw tightened. "I'm not moving." He chuckled like I'd made a joke. "Of course. Not now, but it could be a plan, long term." Long term, that word felt like a noose disguised as a scarf. I closed my Kindle and stood up, too fast. My ankle cracked loudly, and for a second the room tilted. Mark was immediately beside me, hands out like I was an elderly Jenga tower about to collapse. "You okay there?" he said, all concern and fake warmth. I swatted his hands away. "I'm pregnant, not falling apart." "Wait, wrong line. Sorry, I meant I'm old, not breakable." Okay, so humor wasn't my strongest weapon under pressure. I shuffled toward the kitchen anyway. I needed to stay close, I needed to see things, I needed to think clearly. As I passed Mark, he sniffed dramatically. "Smells like something burned earlier," he said. "Mom must have forgotten the kettle again." I stopped. I did not forget the kettle. He winked. "Sure, happens to all of us." It didn't happen to me, but there was no point arguing. People who want you to seem incompetent will collect your every sneeze as evidence. On the counter sat a stack of mail. Bills, coupons. A glossy pamphlet that said, "Silver Pines Retirement Village, because your golden years deserve guidance." Guidance. A fancy marketing word meaning, we'll herd you around like a toddler with arthritis. I flipped the pamphlet over. In big bold letters it read, "We handle medication management so you don't have to think." I nearly snorted. Someone had already tried to handle my medication management, in my kitchen. Today. Behind me, Helen sighed. "Mom, you can't live alone forever. You forget things, you tripped earlier, and Mark found your burner on again last week." I turned slowly. I didn't forget the burner. And I didn't trip. I pretended to trip. Helen blinked. "Why?" "Because Lily warned me the tea might be poisoned." Mark froze. Helen's knife stopped midair. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Helen laughed, too loud, too bright. "Mom, Lily is a child. Kids say things. She probably misunderstood us." "Sure," I said gently, "and I misunderstood the smell of crushed pills in my tea, right?" Her smile faltered. In that moment, Lily came down the stairs carrying a drawing, one of those chaotic kid masterpieces where everyone has giant heads and stick legs. She held it up proudly. "It's us," she said. I looked closer. Me, smiling, big eyes. Lily, holding my hand. Helen and Mark, both drawn in dark crayon, tiny eyebrows angled downward. Kids always know, kids always see. Helen plastered on a smile and ruffled Lily's hair. "Sweetie, go play upstairs." "Can Grandma come with me?" Lily asked, pressing closer. Helen hesitated, 1 second too long. That was all it took for my suspicion to turn into certainty. "I'll go," I said, taking Lily's hand. "I could use a little break." Upstairs, in the hallway where the walls were covered with old family photos, Lily tugged me toward her room, then closed the door behind us. Her face was pale. "Grandma," she whispered, "I think Mommy and Mark want you to go away." I knelt slowly, my knees cracked like bubble wrap, and cupped her cheeks. "I think you might be right," I whispered back. "What are you going to do?" I brushed her hair aside. For the first time in years, I felt something old and fierce rise in my chest. "Sweetheart," I said, "your grandma isn't going anywhere." And downstairs, as if on cue, I heard Mark say, much too loudly, "She's getting easier to handle. Another week and we'll have everything settled." Everything. Settled. A terrible, tidy word. I held Lily tighter and felt my heartbeat steady. If they wanted a fragile old woman, they picked the wrong grandma. By the next morning, I had officially begun my career as a senior citizen undercover agent, minus the cool gadgets, plus a stiff hip and a cardigan that smelled faintly of fear and cinnamon. I woke early, before Helen and Mark, before the house started humming with their footsteps and whispered conversations. The kitchen was cold and quiet, lit only by the blue glow from the refrigerator. I opened it, grabbed the milk, and tried to pretend I wasn't scanning the shelves for anything that looked powdered. Halfway through pouring cereal, I caught myself sniffing the milk carton like a suspicious raccoon. "Get it together, Margaret," I muttered. "You're checking milk like it's a crime scene." I set the milk down and tried to breathe normally. Lily came downstairs wearing pajamas with dinosaurs dancing on them. Kids are blessed with priorities. Trauma at night, T-Rex in the morning. "You okay, Grandma?" she asked. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said. "Just making sure breakfast doesn't explode." She blinked. "Does breakfast explode?" "Not usually," I said. "But we're being cautious today." She nodded solemnly, like I'd imparted ancient grandmother wisdom. We were halfway through our cereal when Helen walked in, hair flawless, makeup done, looking like she'd slept beautifully, which irritated me more than it should have. "Morning," she chirped, too cheerful for a woman whose husband overdosed her tea blend last night. Mark followed behind her, holding his iPhone like it was an extension of his ego. He nodded toward me. "You're up early, Maggie. Couldn't sleep?" "Oh, I slept fine," I said sweetly. "Dreamt my tea tried to murder me, but otherwise delightful." Helen dropped her spoon. "Mom," I smiled over my bowl. "Relax," I said, "dream." Mark shot Helen a look, a small, sharp one, and she forced a laugh. "Mom, please, Lily is here." Lily whispered to me, "Grandma, Mommy's doing her fake laugh." She absolutely was. It was the same laugh she used when relatives asked why she didn't visit more. I cleared my throat. "Helen, could you hand me that vitamin bottle?" She did, but her eyes tracked me too closely. I pretended to take a pill, then dropped it into my sweater pocket like a magician performing a trick that only one audience member understood. Lily's eyes went wide, impressed. Kids love rebellion. Even quiet rebellion from a 70-year-old woman. Mark leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Maggie, don't forget your doctor appointment this afternoon. It's important we stay on top of your health." Translation: We need the doctor to think you're mentally slipping so we can move the paperwork along. "I remember," I said, even though I didn't. Lily had to remind me. My memory was fine. My appointment management skills were trash. After breakfast, Helen and Mark left for errands, which probably meant visiting lawyers or discussing which corner of my house they wanted to repaint in beige once I was gone. When the door shut, I sagged into a chair. My hands shook again. Lily put her tiny palm on my arm. "Don't worry, Grandma, I'll help you. I won't let them take you away." God. Nothing cuts deeper than love, coming from someone too young to understand the weight of what they're holding. I hugged her, careful not to cry on her dinosaur pajamas. "I'm not going anywhere," I vowed. Around noon, the doorbell rang. My spine stiffened. Lily hid behind me like we were in a horror movie and she was the smarter character. But when I opened the door, it wasn't Helen. It wasn't Mark. It was the last person I expected to see on my stoop at noon on a weekday, Lucas. He held a grocery bag in one hand and his hospital badge still clipped to his scrubs. "I was on my lunch break," he said casually. "Thought I'd stop by to check your blood pressure." I blinked. "You came to check my blood pressure on your break?" He shrugged. "And I brought pastries. Priorities." From inside the grocery bag, the unmistakable scent of warm croissants drifted out. I swear my soul left my body for a moment. "You came with carbs," I whispered, genuinely moved. "You're an angel." Lily tugged my sleeve. "Grandma likes him." "Sweetheart," I whispered back, "I like anyone with pastries." Lucas chuckled. "May I come in?" "Please," I said, stepping aside. "The kitchen is only mildly poisoned. Watch your step." He froze. "What?" "Long story," I said. "Have a croissant." We sat at the table while Lily ate half a pastry in one bite. Lucas pulled out a small wrist cuff and gently wrapped it around my arm. "You look tired," he said softly. "I thought I was being murdered," I replied. "It drains a girl." He gave me a look, not disbelief, not pity, just quiet concern. And something else. Something like, "Tell me everything." But before I could, the front door slammed. Helen's voice floated up the stairs. "Mom, we're home." Lucas stiffened. Lily grabbed my hand, and I felt the panic shoot back up my throat. I leaned toward him and whispered, "Play along." He whispered back, "At what?" "I have no idea," I said, "but we'll improvise." Helen's heels clicked across the hardwood floor, a sound that normally just annoyed me, but now made my pulse go wild, like someone had switched my heart to panic mode. Lucas straightened in his chair, trying to look casual, which was difficult because he was wearing scrubs, holding my wrist in a blood pressure cuff, and sitting in my kitchen like a very handsome emergency. Helen appeared in the doorway. Her eyes froze on him. "Oh," she said, smile too bright. "I didn't know we had company." Lucas stood, polite but firm. "I'm just checking on your mom. She had a little dizziness yesterday." Mark walked in behind her, eyebrows lifting. "Did she call you?" "He was in the neighborhood," I said quickly. "And you know how it is. When a woman my age stands up too fast, the angels start placing bets." Lucas choked on a laugh. Mark didn't. Helen tilted her head at me. "Mom, why didn't you tell us you weren't feeling well?" "Because you're the reason I wasn't feeling well, darling." Out loud, I said. "Didn't want to bother you. You two are so busy, running errands." Mark twitched. A small twitch, but I caught it. Years of grading essays taught me to notice micro-expressions, especially the guilty ones. Lucas cleared his throat. "Her vitals look okay, but I'd like her to hydrate and eat something real." I nodded, grateful for the excuse to keep him there longer. Helen opened the fridge, pulled out a plastic container of quinoa and kale, two things that make me question God's sense of humor. "Mom, why don't you eat some of this?" I stared at the bowl. "Sweetheart, I'm 77, not training for the Olympics. Give me toast." She sighed dramatically but reached for the bread. Lucas pretended to be busy packing up his cuff, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch in amusement. As Helen toasted the bread, she turned slightly away from us. And that's when I noticed it. A small, folded paper near the sink, half tucked under a mug. White, crinkled. Exactly like the paper packet Mark had used last night. My stomach went cold. Before I could move, Lily darted into the room wearing mismatched socks and holding a plush giraffe. She pointed at Lucas. "He brought pastries." Helen snapped. "Lily?" "What?" Lily said. "Grandma likes him. She said so." I did not say that. Out loud, Lucas coughed into his fist. Mark gaped. Helen shot me a look like I'd been conducting secret romance missions while she was running errands. I placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. "Go play upstairs, sweetheart." Helen watched her leave, jaw tight. Then she turned back to me. "Mom, we need to talk. In private." Lucas started packing his bag faster. I stood slowly, keeping my posture steady, strong, even if my insides were shaking. In the living room, sunlight spilled through the windows, catching dust motes that floated like tiny planets. The same room where my husband used to read the Sunday paper. The same couch where Lily and I watched cartoons. Now it felt like a courtroom. Helen crossed her arms. "Mom, you've been acting strange, defensive, forgetful." "We're worried." "Worried," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Yes," she insisted. "Worried. Yesterday you almost fell. Last week the burner was on. And this morning you accused us of, she swallowed, poisoning you. I met her eyes evenly. I didn't accuse, I said what Lily told me she heard. Her jaw tightened. You're letting an 8-year-old plant ideas in your head. Before I could answer, Lucas stepped into the doorway, still polite, still calm, but his voice had changed, more serious. With respect, he said, your mother is very aware for her age. Nothing she said is outside normal cognitive function. Helen spun toward him. Excuse me? You're painting a picture of someone confused, he continued, but she's not. And medically speaking, sudden dizziness and disorientation can come from environmental factors. Environmental factors, a very polite way of saying something in her house. Mark scoffed. Are you implying we're causing her symptoms? Lucas didn't blink. I'm saying we need to rule out everything. My heart swelled. Not romantically, yet, but with the sense that someone finally stood on my side. Helen's smile faltered. Well, thank you for your concern, but we can handle our own mother. Lucas looked at me. Margaret, can I speak to you on the porch before I go? Of course. We stepped outside onto the stoop, the air crisp but not cold. Cars rolled down the street, a dog barked across the block, and somewhere a neighbor was yelling at his recycling bin. Real life, ordinary life, kept moving, even while mine cracked apart. Lucas lowered his voice. That paper packet near the sink, did you see it? I nodded. It looked like the same thing from last night. It was, he said quietly. I recognized the folds, and I saw residue. A chill shot up my spine. Margaret, he continued, you're not imagining this. Something is happening in that kitchen. And you need help. I looked through the window. Helen wiping the counter, Mark pacing, Lily's small drawings taped on the fridge, and I felt the weight of everything pressing on me at once. What do? I whispered. Lucas's eyes softened. You let me help you document everything. He stepped off the stoop, pausing before he left. And Margaret, whatever they're planning, you're not facing it alone. He walked away, scrubs brushing in the wind, leaving me standing on my porch with a truth I could no longer deny. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't aging. This wasn't a misunderstanding. My own daughter was preparing the house for a future she didn't want me in, and I needed a plan fast before the next cup of tea didn't miss the mark. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the tea, not because of the packet near the sink, not even because of Helen's mom "we're worried about you" speech, which had all the warmth of an eviction notice. No, I didn't sleep because every time I closed my eyes I saw Lily's face when she whispered, "Don't drink it," and Lucas's eyes when he said, "You need help documenting everything." So the next morning, I started the least glamorous undercover mission in human history. Step 1. Learn how to use my iPhone without accidentally calling the pharmacy twice. I sat at the dining table with my glasses pushed up to my forehead, tapping the screen like it might explode if I pressed too hard. The video record button stared back at me, judging me. Lily, tiny genius, sat across from me with her cereal. "Grandma," she said very gently, "that's the weather app." I squinted. Well, maybe the weather wants to be recorded. She slid my phone toward her, tapped twice, and opened the camera. There. Now press the red circle. I knew that, I lied. She smiled sympathetically. It's okay, you're old. Thank you, sweetheart. Nothing boosts a woman's confidence like a dinosaur pajama wearing 8-year-old calling her ancient. Before I could practice, Helen breezed downstairs in workout leggings. Expensive ones, the kind you buy after watching an inspirational Peloton commercial at 2 a.m. "Morning," she chirped, way too cheerful for someone plotting my disappearance. Mark followed, dressed in business casual that tried very hard to convince people he had a business. "What are you two up to?" Helen asked. Lily answered before I could. "I'm teaching Grandma how to record stuff." I kicked her gently under the table. Helen raised an eyebrow. "Record what?" "Oh, just life," I said. "At my age, everything is a keepsake." She nodded slowly, suspicious but not enough to stop talking. People plotting things often overshare when they think you're harmless. "Mom, after breakfast," Helen said, "Mark and I want to go over some paperwork with you." My pulse skipped. Paperwork? Just routine things. Organizing your finances, simplifying. Simplifying. That word again. They said it the way people say downsize when they really mean throw everything out and start fresh. Mark chimed in. "We just want to make sure you're protected, Maggie." "Yes, protected like a deer in hunting season." I nodded slowly. "Sure, after breakfast. They walked away, and the moment they were gone, I slammed my palm on the table. Lily jumped. "Grandma, I need to get better at lying," I whispered, and fast. She reached over and patted my hand. "You're doing great." I was not doing great. I was doing geriatric espionage. When Helen and Mark went upstairs, I grabbed the iPhone and whispered to myself, "Okay, Margaret, press the red circle. Not the weather, not the flashlight, not FaceTime, the red circle." I pressed it. It opened the calculator. I closed my eyes. Lord, grant me strength and a second brain. Finally, on the fourth try, I hit the actual record button. A tiny red dot appeared. Victory. I wanted to throw confetti. Lily grinned. "You did it." "Of course I did," I said, chest puffed proudly. "I am a modern woman." We tiptoed toward the kitchen. I placed the phone on the counter behind a jar of sugar, inconspicuous enough for normal people, incredibly obvious to anyone who looks at anything. But I had to start somewhere. A moment later, Helen and Mark returned with a thick folder. "Mom," Helen said gently, "this is just to update your will and clarify who handles everything if, God forbid, anything happens." There it was. The script. The plan. "How thoughtful," I said sweetly, pretending not to notice the way Mark kept glancing toward the stove, toward the burner he had found on last week. He slid a pen across the table. "Just sign here, Maggie. It's all standard." I picked up the pen, uncapped it, held it poised above the line, and then, because God has a sense of humor, my arthritis decided to make an appearance. My hand cramped. The pen flew out of my fingers like a missile, bounced off the table, ricocheted off Mark's shoe, and rolled under the fridge. "Oh dear," I said. "I'll need a moment." Mark sighed, dropped to his knees, and stuck his arm under the fridge. This was my chance. I leaned closer, pretending to massage my hand, and whispered, "Helen, darling, could you get me a glass of water?" She nodded, hurrying into the kitchen, right toward the sugar jar, right toward the recording phone. My stomach tightened as she reached for it. Her hand wrapped around the jar. She lifted it, and the phone remained hidden behind it. She carried the jar away without noticing a thing. I nearly fainted from relief. When she returned, I took the water with a trembling smile. "Let me rest a bit," I said. "We can finish the paperwork later." Mark frowned. "The sooner we do it, the better." "Oh, I agree," I said softly, "for all of us." It was the first time I saw something flicker in his eyes. Worry, real, actual worry. They thought I was confused. But I wasn't confused. I was collecting evidence. And they had just given me my first recording. The next morning, I felt like Sherlock Holmes. If Sherlock had arthritis, a floral cardigan, and an iPhone she barely understood. I replayed the secret recording 3 times before Lucas arrived for his wellness check. The audio was faint, but you could clearly hear Helen saying, "Mom needs to sign before she gets worse." And Mark replying, "We can't wait forever." Not exactly case closed, but enough to suggest they were steering me toward something I didn't want. At 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. Lily raced to the front door like a tiny guard dog. "It's him." "Him who?" Helen called from upstairs. "Grandma's friend," Lily shouted back. "Fantastic. That could mean literally anyone in my age group. The mailman, the UPS driver, the plumber. But it was Lucas. He stepped inside holding a paper bag. "I brought muffins," he said. "Blueberry. Figured you could use something that doesn't taste like caution." I nearly hugged him. "Lucas, if these help me survive the week, I'm leaving you the brownstone in my will." He blinked. "Should I be concerned?" "Extremely," I whispered. We sat at the table, and Lily perched beside me like a small paralegal. I played the recording for him. He listened carefully, brows knitting. "It's something," he said. "Not enough for police yet, but definitely worth building on." "Building on," I repeated. "Lucas, I can barely open my email without accidentally buying 3 Kindle books." Lily raised her hand like we were in class. "I can help." Lucas smiled. "See? You have a tech team." I snorted. "A tech team that goes to bed at 8:30. Before we could strategize, Helen entered the room, looking flawless, suspicious, and deeply irritated by the presence of someone she couldn't manipulate. "Lucas," she said, smiling too politely, "you're here again." "Just checking on your mom," he replied, unbothered. Mark followed, eyes darting around the room as if searching for hidden traps. If only he knew how bad I was at hiding things, he'd stop worrying. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Oh yes," I said sweetly. "I'm just learning new things, like how to use my phone. Did you know the record button isn't the weather app?" Helen froze. Mark's jaw twitched. Lucas coughed, covering a smile. Helen plastered on a grin. Mom, why would you need to record anything? I shrugged casually. Oh, memories, conversations, maybe final wishes. Life is so unpredictable. Mark stared at me like he was recalculating his entire strategy. Good. Anyway, I continued cheerfully, I'd love help reviewing yesterday's paperwork. Helen and Mark exchanged a quick, silent conversation with their eyes. Then Helen brightened. Perfect. Let's finish it after lunch. Lucas stood. Actually, I'd like to give her a quick checkup before she does anything stressful. Stressful? Mark repeated. Signing estate documents isn't stressful. Ah, Lucas said, but deception is. If tension were electricity, the whole house would have blown a fuse. Helen inhaled sharply, then forced a smile. Lucas, we appreciate your concern, but she didn't get to finish, because suddenly there was a loud thump from upstairs. We all turned, then another thump, then what sounded like a moan. Oh no, Lily whispered. Grandma's upstairs ghost is awake. I do not have a ghost, I said automatically, but everyone stared up the staircase. Mark frowned. Did you leave a window open? Helen shook her head. Lucas looked concerned. Should I check? Before he could move, Lily bolted up the stairs. I'll look. Lily, Helen called, but it was too late. Moments later, Lily shouted down from the top floor. It's the cat. We didn't have a cat, Mark cursed under his breath. Helen went pale. I climbed halfway up the stairs, Lucas close behind me, and there in the middle of the hallway was the neighbor's enormous orange cat, Mr. Pudding, sitting like he owned the place. Lily pointed dramatically. He came in the window. Mr. Pudding meowed like he confirmed the accusation. Lucas stifled a laugh. Helen groaned. Mark muttered something about freaking animals. But I felt something shift, because if a cat could slip into my house unnoticed, what else could? When we finally herded Mr. Pudding out the door, he protested like we were evicting him. I turned to Lucas. How do I record video without the cat turning it off? I asked. He smiled. I'll set up something easier. Mark narrowed his eyes. Set up what exactly? Lucas held his gaze. Environmental monitoring. I didn't know what that meant, but the way Mark stiffened told me it was exactly the right answer. Helen forced a laugh. No need for that. Lucas didn't move. Actually, there is. The silence that followed was heavy, terrible, and sharp. And in the middle of it, Lily quietly slipped her hand into mine. It hit me then, clearer than any recording. Helen and Mark weren't worried about my health. They were worried about losing control. By the next morning, the tension in the house had a flavor. If fear tasted metallic and guilt tasted sour, whatever Helen and Mark were cooking up tasted like oversteeped green tea and bad decisions. They were nervous. I could feel it drifting off them like cheap perfume. Helen lingered too long in doorways. Mark hovered near the kitchen like he was guarding national secrets behind the sugar jar. And I, armed with newfound tech skills courtesy of an 8-year-old, was ready. Step 2 of Operation Not Dead Yet was simple. Act normal. Unfortunately, normal was not my strength. I shuffled into the kitchen wearing slippers, my floral robe, and a glare that could curdle milk. Helen turned from the stove. Morning, Mom. Morning, I said. What's for breakfast? Poison? She dropped the spatula. Mark choked on his coffee. I added pleasantly, kidding. Imagine if I wasn't joking, though. Lucas would be so proud of my subtlety. Or horrified, hard to tell. Helen forced a laugh that sounded like it was fighting for its life. Mom, please stop saying things like that. It's upsetting. Oh, I said. You're upset? Helen stared at me, clearly debating whether to call a therapist or a priest. Before she could gather a retort, there was a knock on the door. A firm, professional knock. Mark stiffened. Who's that? Probably Jesus, I said, checking on me. Helen glared and went to answer. It wasn't Jesus, it was Lucas, wearing jeans, a jacket, and holding a small box under his arm. Morning, he said, just dropping by. Helen blinked. Again? Mark muttered. Does he live here now? If he did, I said sweetly, at least I'd feel safe. Lucas tried not to smile. I brought something to help with the environmental monitoring. Mark's eyebrow twitched violently. What device? It's just a small air quality sensor, Lucas said naturally. Picks up chemical particulates, unusual powders, airborne sedatives. Helen nearly swallowed her own tongue. Oh, she squeaked. That sounds unnecessary. Lucas shrugged. Better safe than sorry. I loved this man. He set the device on the counter, small, white, perfectly innocent looking. It beeped once, a soft little chime like a robot clearing its throat. Mark stepped back like it was a bomb. Lily skipped in, saw the sensor and gasped. "Grandma, is that a spy machine?" Before I could answer, Lucas knelt beside her. "It's a helper machine. It tells us if the air is safe." "Oh," she said, "like when Mommy sprays that weird cleaning stuff that makes Grandma cough?" Helen dropped the spatula again. Lucas stood, straight-faced. "I see." I almost applauded Lily. That child was either psychic or destined for the FBI. Helen sputtered. "Lily, honey, that spray is natural." Lucas cut in gently. "Natural doesn't always mean harmless." Mark crossed his arms. "Why are you even involved in this?" "Because," Lucas said calmly, "I'm a mandated healthcare professional, and when a patient reports dizziness and strange symptoms, I take it seriously." Helen looked like she'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. "Mom told you she felt dizzy?" "I sure did," I said. "Right after drinking one of your teas. Coincidence, right?" Mark nearly combusted. To diffuse the moment, or possibly worsen it, I grabbed a muffin from the counter and took a dramatic bite. Only, it wasn't a muffin. It was a stress relief squishy toy shaped like a muffin. I froze mid-chew. Lucas stared. Helen stared. Mark stared. Lily whispered, "Grandma, that's foam." I slowly lowered it. "Yes, well, I was testing it." "For what?" Helen snapped. "Poison," I said proudly. Mark rubbed his temples. "Jesus Christ." Lucas bit the inside of his cheek to keep from laughing. After a moment, Lucas cleared his throat. "Margaret, can we talk privately?" "Of course," I said, following him into the hallway. He lowered his voice. "The sensor will log everything for a few days. If there's anything unusual, any residue, airborne particles, anything, it'll show." I nodded. "And then?" "Then," he said quietly, "we take the evidence to someone who can actually do something." I swallowed. Hard. "Lucas, what if they try something again?" "That's why the sensor is there," he said gently, "and why I'm checking on you every day." Through the kitchen doorway, I could see Helen pacing and Mark whisper yelling. They were unraveling, and Lucas had just pulled the thread. I exhaled slowly. "Do you think I'm overreacting?" He met my eyes. "No, I think you've been underreacting for months." That hit deep. Then he added, voice low, "And Margaret, I'm not going anywhere." My chest tightened, not from fear, but something softer, dangerous in a different way. Before I could respond, Lily bolted out of the kitchen. "Srath, Grandma!" she shouted. "The spy machine is beeping." Lucas and I turned. Helen and Mark froze. The small white device blinked red. The sensor blinked red like a tiny, judgmental lighthouse warning ships and grandmothers to turn back immediately. Helen gasped. Mark swore under his breath. Lucas stepped forward like a man who'd been preparing for this moment his entire adult life. "What does that mean?" Helen demanded, voice shaking. Lucas crouched beside the device. "It means something in this kitchen triggered the detection threshold." "Triggered with what?" Mark barked. Lucas didn't look up. "Typically, sedative particulates, certain powders, chemical residues you wouldn't normally find floating in the air unless someone was grinding something in here." Helen went paler than skim milk. Lily whispered, "Grandma, does this mean we have ghosts and poison?" "Sweetheart," I said, patting her hand, "if the house had both, the rent should at least be cheaper." Lucas stood. "Has anything been spilled, crushed, broken, powdered supplements, cleaning chemicals?" Helen shot a panicked glance toward the counter, and that was all I needed. The white paper packet I'd seen before was gone, replaced with a dish towel. A badly placed one, too. If you're going to poison your mother, at least develop basic hiding skills. Lucas scanned the room. "We'll need to check surfaces." Helen blurted, "You're invading our privacy." "Our?" Lucas repeated, "This is Margaret's home." Mark opened his mouth, then closed it because the truth was inconvenient. Lucas was about to inspect the sink when Lily tugged my sleeve and whispered, "Grandma, tell him about the weird powder on the spoon yesterday." That made my spine stiffen. "Honey," I murmured, "what spoon? The one Mommy told me not to touch." My heart thudded. Lucas turned sharply. "Where is it?" Helen stepped forward too fast. "She's a child. She's confused." "Funny," Lucas said evenly. "She hasn't been wrong yet." Helen inhaled sharply, offended, cornered, terrified. Mark tried to redirect. "Maybe the sensor is faulty, cheap things break." Lucas smiled politely. "This model is FDA certified." Mark shut up. Before Lucas could continue, the front doorbell rang. A long, sharp ring. Not friendly. Not neighborly. Official. Helen's head snapped toward the sound. Who is that? Lucas frowned. Expecting someone? No, she said too quickly. I stood, adjusting my cardigan like armor. Lily, stay with me. Mark opened the door and froze. On the porch stood a woman in a slate gray suit holding a leather folder and an ID badge. Good morning, she said briskly. I'm with Senior Protective Services. We received a report of possible elder endangerment at this address. Helen grabbed the doorframe. What? The officer held up a stack of papers. We're required to perform a wellness check. I blinked. A wellness check? For me? She nodded. A neighbor submitted a concern anonymously. My eyes darted to Lucas. He very casually looked at the ceiling. Helen spun toward me, livid. Mom, did you call them? I didn't even know Senior Protective Services was a thing, I said. Although honestly, it sounds like a club I should have joined years ago. The officer continued professionally. We've received a pattern of flagged data, doctor visits, reports of dizziness, sudden health changes, environmental abnormalities. Helen sputtered. That's because she's old. The officer raised a calm eyebrow. Age doesn't disqualify someone from being harmed. Boom, roasted by bureaucracy. Ma'am, she continued to me, I'll need to speak with you privately. Mark stepped forward, desperate. We take amazing care of her, I answered first. He does. He checks the tea very carefully. Lucas made a strangled coughing noise. The officer motioned me toward the living room. I sat on the couch while she took notes. Do you feel unsafe in your home? She asked gently. Yes, I said, but not because of ghosts or arthritis. Has anyone pressured you about your will or home ownership? I let that hang in the air like a chandelier. Yes, I said finally. Behind us, in the kitchen, Helen whispered furiously, This is your fault. Mark hissed back, Shut up, she can hear you. The officer kept writing. And do you feel you've been given anything unusual in your food or drinks? I looked her straight in the eye. I was advised not to drink my tea yesterday, I said. By my granddaughter. She overheard something. The officer's pen froze mid-sentence. She turned toward Lucas. You're her healthcare contact? I am, he said firmly. I'll need to collect that sensor, and I'll need both of you to provide statements. Helen shrieked. Statements for what? For an ongoing safety assessment, the officer said calmly. Then she added the sentence that made Helen and Mark sway like someone had punched them in the stomach. And if we find sufficient cause, this may escalate to a criminal investigation. Silence dropped into the room like a stone. Lucas moved to stand beside me. Lily crawled onto my lap. Helen looked like she was calculating escape routes. Mark looked like he wished he'd never learned the words power of attorney. And me? For the first time since Lily whispered, "Don't drink it," I felt the smallest flicker of control return to my hands. The Senior Protective Services officer stayed much longer than Helen expected, and far longer than Mark could emotionally withstand. If guilt had a physical form, Mark looked like he was wearing it as a 10-pound weighted blanket. Meanwhile, I sat on my couch like a polite thunderstorm. Lucas hovered near the window, arms crossed, quiet, observant, terrifyingly calm. Lily sat beside me, coloring a unicorn committing tax fraud. I'm 90% sure that was unintentional, but still symbolic. The officer closed her folder. Mrs. Collins, we'll be opening a formal case file. I'll need to collect any items related to your concerns. Helen gasped. What items? Lucas answered. The sensor for one. Mark's eye twitched. That thing is faulty. It's FDA certified, Lucas reminded him. Lily added, also it beeped at you, Mommy. Maybe it doesn't like you. Helen looked like she might spontaneously combust. All right, the officer said, standing. Before I leave, I'd like to walk through the kitchen once more. I rose, leaning on my cane, dramatic effect. My knees were fine. Of course. We entered the kitchen where sunlight streamed across the counter like it was auditioning for a feel-good commercial. Totally inappropriate for a crime scene. The officer examined surfaces, handled gloves on, her expression businesslike. She opened drawers, looked behind jars, checked wastebaskets. Then she paused at the sink. What's this? She asked. Helen leaped forward. Just a towel. But towels don't usually have white powder beneath them. The officer lifted the towel and revealed a faint dusting of residue clinging to the porcelain basin. Lucas leaned in. That wasn't there yesterday. Mark shot him a look that said, I would like to remove you from this narrative. Permanently. The officer scraped a sample into a small evidence container. We'll test this at the lab. Helen sputtered. It's just Just laundry detergent. The officer didn't blink. In the sink? Helen blinked. Yes. Loose? In powder form? Helen blinked again, faster this time, like a malfunctioning robot. Lucas whispered toward me. She's panicking, I whispered back. This is better than cable. The officer turned to me. Mrs. Collins, is there anything else you'd like to share? I inhaled deeply, and then, with all the dignity of an elderly spy queen, I reached into my cardigan pocket and pulled out the folded paper packet I had saved from 2 days earlier. Helen made a choking sound. Mark actually stepped backward. I found this, I said calmly, near the tea. The officer bagged it as evidence. She finished her inspection, thanked us, and said, I will return with follow-up questions. If anything new happens, call me immediately. She handed me her card. Helen tried to snatch it from my hand. I held it out of reach. I can dial just fine. No, you can't, Helen protested. Then it's a miracle I'm still alive, I said sweetly. The officer left. The door shut, and the house erupted. Helen spun toward me. Mom, how could you? Mark added, You're ruining everything. Everything, I echoed. Interesting word choice. Mom, Helen snapped, you're letting strangers, interfere in our private family matters. Lucas stepped forward. That stranger just prevented a potential crime. Helen swung toward him. No one asked for your involvement. Lucas didn't flinch. Margaret did. I felt something flutter inside my chest. Hope? Validation? Low blood sugar? Hard to say. Mark pointed at the sensor. Take your stupid machine and get out. Lucas smiled, slow and lethal. It stays. Over my dead body, Mark growled. I patted his arm. Let's avoid dead bodies, okay? It's been a theme lately. Helen let out a strangled noise that could have been a laugh or a scream. Before they could attack verbally, Lily walked in holding her drawing. Grandma, she said proudly, I made a picture of our family. We all looked. There was me and Lily, smiling. Lucas, drawn with an enormous superhero cape. Helen, crying. Mark, behind bars. Lucas choked. I pressed a hand to my mouth. Helen squeaked. What is that? Mark muttered, that child is possessed. Lily shrugged. That's what it looks like is happening. I whispered to Lucas, she's prophetic. He whispered back, she's accurate. Helen snatched the paper. Go to your room. But Lily ran to me instead. I hugged her close. Mark pointed at me, furious. We're finishing the paperwork today, with or without your cooperation. Lucas stepped between us. No, you're not, Helen hissed. Stay out of it. Lucas didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. He simply said, try touching her paperwork. I dare you. For a moment, just a flicker, Mark looked genuinely afraid. And that's when I knew something fundamental had shifted. They could intimidate me. But they couldn't intimidate us. I didn't plan on becoming the 70-year-old who accidentally triggered a criminal investigation in her own kitchen. But sometimes life hands you poisoned tea, and you have two choices. Drink it, or flip the entire table. By the next morning, the house felt like a shaken soda can. One wrong move and someone was going to explode. And as it turned out, the exploding someone was Mark. It started at 7:12 a.m., when the senior protective services officer returned with a second investigator and a small evidence kit. Helen nearly fainted. Mark paced like a man being hunted by his own conscience. Ma'am, the officer said to me, the lab ran preliminary tests. The residue in your sink contained a sedative inconsistent with any prescription you're supposed to be taking. Helen let out a squeal that sounded like a hamster trapped under a couch. Mark said nothing. He didn't blink, didn't breathe, just froze. And, the officer continued, the paper packet you provided also tested positive for traces of the same substance. Lucas exhaled quietly. I squeezed Lily's hand. Helen's knees buckled and she grabbed the table for support. But the officer wasn't done. We've also reviewed your medical charts, she said. Your recent unexplained dizziness and blood pressure drops align with sedative exposure. I raised my hand politely. Just to clarify, the kind of exposure you get from intentional poisoning or the kind you get from bad cooking. Lucas nudged me gently. Intentional, he whispered. The officer nodded. Intentional. Helen turned to Mark, shaking. You said she wouldn't notice anything. Mark hissed. Not in front of them, Helen. Too late. Far, far too late. The investigators exchanged a look, and then came the knock. 3 sharp, unmistakable knocks. Mark went white. No, no, no. But when the door opened, 2 uniformed NYPD officers stepped in. Mark Reynolds, one said. What? Mark croaked. This is a misunderstanding. You're under arrest for attempted elder endangerment, attempted fraud, and suspected poisoning. Helen screamed. Actually screamed. Like full horror movie scream. Mark backed away, palms up. You can't arrest me. I didn't do anything. Sir, the officer said calmly, we literally have video of you preparing tea. TA isn't a crime. Drugging the tea is. Before Mark could bolt, Lucas stepped in front of him like a brick wall disguised as a handsome man in casual clothes. Mark turned and tried to run anyway, straight into my hallway wall. It was the best comedic moment of the entire investigation. Even the cops tried not to laugh. They cuffed him and walked him to the door. Helen sobbed, shaking, pale as drywall. The second officer approached her gently. Ma'am, you're not under arrest at this time, but you will need to come in for questioning. Helen looked at me, eyes swollen, face cracked open with guilt and fear. Mom, I never meant, I didn't, I just thought. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Helen, I whispered, you let him hurt me, you protected him, not me. She broke. Full collapse. They helped her outside. The door shut. The house exhaled. So did I. Lily climbed onto my lap and wrapped her arms around me. Grandma, are we safe now? I kissed her head. Yes, sweetheart, we're safe. Lucas knelt beside us, his voice soft, certain. It's over, Margaret. Is it? I asked. Yes, he said. And now it's your turn to live however you want. Something inside me, something tight, coiled, bruised, finally loosened. I hugged Lily tighter, then looked at Lucas. He offered me his hand. Not like a rescuer, like a partner. Come on, he said gently. Let's get some fresh air. We stepped onto the porch, the cool Brooklyn breeze brushing past us. The morning light hit the street just right, and for the first time in months, the world didn't feel dangerous. It felt possible. Down the block, Mr. Pudding, the cat, was sunbathing on a stoop like he owned real estate. Lily waved at him. He's back. Let him, I said. He's probably the only man on this street who didn't try to poison me. Lucas laughed, really laughed, and I felt my cheeks warm. He took a slow breath. Margaret, whatever you need next, therapy, lawyers, a vacation, a new lock, a new life, I'm here. I looked at him, really looked. The kindness, the steadiness, the quiet warmth I hadn't felt from another human being in a very long time. I think, I said softly, I'd like to start with a coffee. Starbucks? He asked. Always. We walked down the steps together, me, Lucas, and Lily, leaving behind a house that had tried to swallow me. But I wasn't swallowed. I was reborn. And for the first time since Lily whispered, "Don't drink that tea," the world felt like it belonged to me again. 3 years passed, not suddenly, not cleanly. Grief never leaves in one piece, but slowly, quietly, like winter melting off a long-ignored window. My brownstone is lighter now, not physically. I still refuse to throw out the hideous rooster lamp my husband bought in 1989, but emotionally, the air moves differently. The rooms don't echo with fear anymore. They hum. Lily is 11 now, taller, freckled, braver than most adults I know. She visits every weekend, bringing me school gossip, half-finished art projects, and unsolicited critiques of my fashion choices. "Grandma, you can't wear beige every day. It makes you look like oatmeal." She's the one who taped a new drawing on my fridge. Me, Lucas, and her, sitting at a picnic in Central Park, eating croissants. Under it, she wrote, "Safe now." She's right. Helen did her time. Court-mandated therapy. Restitutions? Supervised visits? Our relationship is no longer the open wound it once was. Some scars stay, some soften. Life's funny that way. You don't always get apologies in the shape you want, but sometimes you get the ones you need. Mark, however, earned himself a longer stay with the state of New York. Let's just say Prison Orange did him no favors. If he ever writes a Yelp review about my kitchen, I'll sue. As for Lucas, the day everything fell apart, when they arrested Mark, when the truth spilled all over my hardwood floors like broken glass, he didn't just help me survive. He stayed. Not out of obligation. Not out of pity. He stayed because he loved me. Though neither of us said the words right away. Healing is slow. Trust is slower. Love at this age is a luxury you don't rush. But we built something. Tiny, gentle, ridiculous moments. Like the time we tried yoga and he fell into a succulent. Or when he helped me set up my Kindle again because I kept accidentally buying bulk romance novels. Or when he kissed me for the first time on my stoop under the glow of a street lamp and said, "You make my life quieter in the best way." We don't live together. Not yet. I like having my own space, my own kettle, my own morning silence. But he has a key, and he uses it as if silence or I am something worth coming back to. This morning, I woke up early. Brooklyn was quiet. The sunrise brushed gold across the windows, and I made myself a cup of tea. I still hesitate before the first sip. Healing or not, habits linger. But now it's a small hesitation, the kind you breathe through. Not the kind that steals your oxygen. I carried the tea to the window and sat in my husband's old armchair, the one Lucas reupholstered for me, because it felt too sad in that color. The Manhattan skyline shimmered in the distance. The world looked softer. A few minutes later, Lily knocked on the door. Her father brought her early today. She ran inside wearing a purple coat and mismatched socks. "Grandma," she shouted. "Guess what?" "What?" She held up a small paper bag. "Lucas brought pastries." I laughed. He knows my weakness. A moment later, Lucas appeared in the doorway, smiling the way people do when they're looking at home, not a person. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I replied. "You're here early." He stepped in, kissed my cheek, and handed me a warm croissant. "I figured you'd need breakfast before our trip." "Trip?" Lily gasped. "Where are we going?" "Central Park," he said. "Margaret wants to show us the place where she and her husband had their first date." I froze, not in pain, just surprise. It had been decades since I said his name out loud without crying. "You sure?" Lucas asked gently. I nodded. "Yes, I think it's time." So we walked, me, Lily, and Lucas, down the familiar Brooklyn sidewalks across the bridge into the green beating heart of the city. And when we reached that little bench beneath the cherry tree, the one covered in old initials and memories, I sat down and let myself feel everything. The love I'd lost, the family I'd almost lost, the danger I survived, the courage I didn't know I had, the man beside me, the granddaughter who saved my life. The future still waiting for me. Lucas took my hand, warm, steady, young in ways that mattered, old in ways that counted. "You okay?" he whispered. I nodded. "I'm more than okay." For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for something bad to happen. I was simply living. And the tea I sipped that morning tasted exactly how tea should taste. Safe, warm,